please welcome Program Committee members Stephany Vaioleti and Grace Relf to talk about the Energy Equity Docket.
All right, aloha everybody. I'm super excited to be able to talk story with Grace Relf, who is the Chief of Policy and Research at the PUC. And she was previously a senior analyst for the last 3 years, almost 3 years. And I remember we were both kind of newish to our positions. And Grace is the only ultimate Frisbee player that I know, which is awesome. And the thing, and you guys can take a look at her bio, it's very impressive. But the thing that I will always remember about Grace is how kind and how graceful, see her name is appropriate, very graceful, kind, welcoming, always asking questions, seeking to understand. She's a very good listener and always wanting to learn and so smart. And so I appreciate her taking the time. She actually just finished a conference for the Western region of all the PUCs and was able to fit us into her schedule. So introducing Grace, I'll give her some time to talk through about the Energy Equity Docket.
Wow, thank you so much for that intro. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and for this opportunity to talk about the Energy Equity Docket that we've just opened at the PUC. Before I start, I really want to encourage you all to ask questions about this docket. So if you would please submit them to Stephany, we'll definitely have time for questions at the end. So what I'm going to say has definitely been already said numerous times throughout this conference, but I'm really excited to be able to tell you about what we're doing about some of these challenges we're facing at the PUC and really to welcome you into that fold. So as I've listened to the speakers this week, it's very clear to me that all of us in Hawaii are working towards this same goal of ensuring that in the face of climate change, our communities in Hawaii are vibrant and thriving. Even if we may disagree on how to do it or how to get there, I think decarbonizing and doing so quickly is really a goal that we all share in order to serve our communities. And I think, I heard that from Shelley earlier today. From my perspective, this shared vision is really critical because Hawaii is facing some serious challenges in the energy world right now. We're going to need all of our brain power and enthusiasm to tackle them. The really prominent and common theme throughout this conference so far has been community engagement. It's really important that we engage our communities upfront and often in our energy transition. And this is not news to the PUC, but I am excited that we now have a more official forum to welcome communities into our fold at the PUC and to help our work in a more systematic way. So this is the Energy Equity Docket that you've heard mentioned a couple of times in our work, throughout this conference. So while the PUC has definitely been taking action on energy equity for a number of years, last year's legislature in 2022 actually specifically asked us to address energy equity and justice more holistically throughout our work as a PUC and in our functions regulating our state's utilities. The legislators called out a number of different challenges to energy equity across Hawaii, including one I'm sure you've all felt, high energy prices. So many aspects of the past few years with the pandemic have been really challenging and thrown unexpected challenges our way. We had a global war that really caused energy price spikes. We had supply chains delaying our renewable energy projects, as you just heard from our developers. We had inflation, all of these things that are putting pressure on rates and on our families to be able to afford their home energy. This is really a paramount issue, affordability of energy, and it's really intertwined with so many aspects of the energy landscape. The legislators also called out historic inequities in where our energy infrastructure is sited. We know that majority Native Hawaiian communities and low-income communities have been burdened with fossil fuel infrastructure for decades. Those communities often are those that also cannot afford to directly benefit from rooftop solar or from batteries and have been left out of the energy transition in that way as well. And even now today, those communities are the same ones where there are ample opportunities for solar and for land availability. So we need to be thinking about what it means to host our energy infrastructure and what benefits we should be giving to those that are hosting. These are really just some of the most pressing challenges to a more equitable system in Hawaii, but of course there are so many more. So the PUC opened this docket to be able to look at how we can better incorporate principles of equity and justice across our work and in our decision making, and to make our energy system a more equitable place. This spring, we officially kicked off the docket's work with a few public meetings where we really kind of introduced what we thought might be a good direction for this docket, some of the issues we might tackle as a starting place, and we welcomed community input on those items. We are about to release our draft work plan for the docket, and it identifies 5 different pathways that we think we might tackle up front for this work. The first, as I mentioned, is energy affordability, which we're going to look at ways to make energy more affordable for all customers, but also specifically focus our attention on low and moderate income customers who we know have a disproportionate energy burden and are disproportionately affected by high rates. The second is energy infrastructure and siting and hosting. And this is going to look at ways that we can improve community outcomes as we look to that increase in utility scale solar that we know is needed to reach our 100% goals. For example, we might look at community benefits packages, how those have been structured and how they could be better structured in the future. Third, the equitable access to clean energy pathway recognizes that certain populations have been left out of our transition to date. So we want to look at how the benefits have been of distributed energy resources like solar and batteries and EVs have accrued to different communities, or in certain cases, how they have not accrued. We might even look to develop a new pilot program or programs in this docket. Fourth, we want to look at the utilities business models. We know that there are inherent incentives in the way that the utility functions and operates that may or may not promote equity in our energy system. So we want to take a look at how those business models are set up and whether modifications might be needed. Finally, the fifth pathway is to look at procedural equity. And this is really where the PUC is going to turn our eye internally and aim to make our processes more accessible. We know that we can be a black box sometimes, and we want to hear more voices in our decision making so that they can be better informed. I know this sounds like a lot, and it definitely is a lot of work to be done, but we are trying to be ambitious here, and we want to take a measured pace so that we can really achieve these ambitious goals and outcomes. So this is very much the beginning of the work. Once the draft work plan is released, we want your comments, we want your input, and then we'll take another swing at it. We will welcome those comments, via our traditional ways, like filing comments. We'll welcome them at meetings, or other ways if you have ideas of how you can get in touch with us better. And I just really want to encourage you all to join us on this journey. It's going to be made a lot better by involving more people. So in this room today, you can sign up for email alerts about the docket on our webpage. It's puc.hawaii.gov/energy/equity. And yeah, I'm excited to take some questions now as well. Thank you.
So I have a question. What kinds of affordability measures might be explored in the docket?
Yeah, thanks, Stephany. So I think there are a lot of different ways to think about energy affordability. We can look at the overall spending from our utilities and ways that we could incentivize overall cost control. We could also look at, discounted rates for low-income customers, or providing other rate designs that might be more cost efficient. And one thing that I'm actually excited about, which may not be too exciting to other people, but is looking at payment plans for folks who are having trouble paying their energy bills. I think there have been proven models in other states where the utility has been able to accept lower payments from customers struggling to pay their bills, but making them more consistent. And overall, that actually increases the total amount of revenue that they're collecting from these customers, which reduces costs overall for everybody. So I think there are some innovative ways that we can look at energy affordability, and I'm excited to hear from the folks in the docket about which ones they're excited to pursue as well.
Great. What does it mean to test procedural equity improvements, and how can folks get involved?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So historically, the PUC has burdensome regulatory processes. And these are in place for a reason. You know, they're in place to protect rights and to protect customers, but they are time-consuming, they're technical, and they're really hard to get involved in for folks who are not steeped in this world. So we are trying to use this docket as a way to test improvements to how we engage the public and stakeholders who are not typically involved in our proceedings. So we're trying a lot of different ways. You know, our first 2 meetings, we ran them in a hybrid virtual in-person format, and we learned a lot from that. We are thinking about different ways that we can more proactively visit our neighbor islands, that we can get out into our communities and reach people where they are. And we're thinking about new creative ways that we can solicit input. So for this docket, you actually do not need to be a formal intervener or a participant in order to have your voice heard. We're welcoming comments from any direction. So any way that you feel you can get in touch with us, we're happy to listen, and we'll be welcoming your input that way. And hopefully, in my view, you know, an outcome of this docket will be that our processes are changed permanently going forward to make our processes more accessible on all proceedings.
Thank you, Grace. And from someone who has never participated in a docket proceeding, I thought those first 2 meetings were super interesting and informative. You know, we had people that were jumping into the space that were very seasoned, formal interveners, all the way to someone who wanted to talk about their utility bill. So you have the spectrum. Another question. How are you all thinking about community engagement and learning from ongoing efforts across the state and elsewhere?
Yeah, well, as I said, I think, you know, that has been the common thread of this conference so far. So it's definitely something that's on everybody's minds, and we're not looking to recreate the wheel. I know there's a lot of work we can draw from the State Energy Office, their Energize Kako efforts. You know, the developers and the utility go out into communities, the utilities go out into their communities and talk to stakeholders directly and engage that way. I think we're also seeing a lot of efforts on this across the continental U.S. as well. At the PUC, we've been working with other PUCs to learn from their efforts. And, you know, it's just an interesting spot to be a utility commission that the general public does not always know who we are or what we do. So I think we're trying to navigate too, what is our role, and in what senses does it make sense for us to be a public-facing agency or to work with others to support their efforts? So it's definitely something we're testing out, but yeah, welcome people's thoughts as well.
Okay, I am not seeing any questions in the chat. So I guess maybe if you have any closing thoughts or an ask or anything you want to end our talk story session on.
Yeah, I would encourage you all to get involved. So I know that there are a lot of different sort of pathways that this docket has outlined. If there's one that you feel particularly strongly about or engaged on, please come to us and please participate in the docket. We would love to hear your voice. Talk to your communities about this as well and welcome them into the fold. We heard that stakeholders really want to have more keiki and youth involved in our proceedings. If you know people that we should be in touch with, let me know and we will get them involved as well. But I think from my perspective, I'm just really excited about having some concrete and tangible actions that I think will come out of this docket and that we can all learn from. So if you're not going to be involved, at least stay up to date on what we're doing. And yeah, I'd be happy to chat with folks more about this as well. So feel free to pull me aside later and we can talk story then as well. So thanks, Stephany.
Thank you, Grace. Appreciate it.